I'm always talking about BASIC, but I don't think I've actually showed it to you, right? So I got some footage of me using BASIC just to explain it to you. And the one that I started on when I was young was BBC BASIC. It was, I think I was probably 7 or 8, maybe 6, 7, something like that. They had one computer in my whole school. It was a BBC, and nobody knew how to use it. None of the teachers could use it. I think there was one guy that knew how to use it. So how I ended up using it was I used to go truant, if you like, from my lesson, and then sneak into the school in a different door and go into the computer room, and I'd sit and play the computer. Until my eventual exclusion, I was expelled for this, and then I had to go off to another school, which thankfully had more and better computers. So anyway, I'll show you the BBC footage, but the reason I'm showing you this is to show you, even though it looks complicated, when you watch me type it out and you see how I control the computer with the BASIC code, it gives you an insight into how easy it is to pick up. It's literally like if you had a robot. If you know the command, you can say, go, that's the command, over there, that's the bit of data that you want it to react to, so go over there, and that's a logical thing. Do this, that's another command. Then come back here, that's another command. So that's kind of like how a BASIC program is formulated. The first few lines are setting up, like clear the screen, paint it blue, or whatever. Then you've got the main bit of the program in the middle, and then end will usually be the last line. If it's a program that doesn't just continuously revolve, it will have an ending to it. So here we go. Anyway, I'll show you. Oh, and if you're wondering why I'm dressed for the outdoors and I've got my dressing gown on, this is how I can afford all the stuff that I go on about. I've been criticised in the past for showing off things that cost money. Well, here's how I do it. It's freezing cold outside. Instead of putting my heating on, put a hat on, I put another layer on. So instead of spending money on heating, I now spend it on this stuff. But anyway, back to the point at hand. Here's the BBC BASIC footage. This is your BASIC prompt. This is where you type all your stuff in. And primarily what you'll be typing in is commands. This is the words you use in order to issue instructions. And when you list a lot of instructions together in a tally, and you run them all one after the other in sequential order, that's your program. And so these commands, together with your logic operators, variables, and changing your memory values, you will be able to perform various tasks, moving things around the screen, making graphics, making sounds, and user control, things like that, having arrow keys, move things around. So what I'm going to do now is type out some basic programs for you to have a look at and go through some of the things that you will see if you try and type one out. So here I've typed out some things for you to read. You don't have to read them. I just wanted to show that if you type things out and it doesn't make any sense, if the commands are incorrect, you'll get the term mistake as an error code, which is quite useful because it lets you know what's going on. If you get syntax error, that generally means that you've put something in the wrong place, or you've put a wrong comma or something like that. So there's a spelling error, if you like, in there, or a grammatical error. Now there's tons of different versions of BASIC. This one is BBC BASIC, run on an emulator called BeebM on Windows. But there's many more. There's Commodore BASIC, which is more popular, has less graphical commands, but generally on a better machine. You have Microsoft BASIC. I think there's a QBasic variant. And then you have Visual BASIC, which is the more recent, well, it's like it says, it's a visual library language, so you get to use much more graphical thingies in there than you would in this version. But this version is the most simple one that you'll find, the most easy to learn, and it's reactive. It's like immediate, real time. So I think it's one of the best learning tools. Demonstrated here is the initial command you will learn, CLS, which is to clear the screen. So it's obviously useful for various purposes, but I find when you're typing out a program, sometimes you just want the clutter gone, so it's easier to read and easier to actually write. And you might think clearing the screen would be a simple endeavour, and it is within BASIC because it all is done within one word. But if you're writing that in assembler, it's probably a little bit more difficult. So, thank God for BASIC, really, for us who are starting out. Learning all the commands is actually very simple. Like I said earlier, there's a guide with them all written in there. It's like a dictionary of terms, and anyone who can read and make notes will be able to master that in no time at all. So that will be your starting venue, your starting avenue. And through experimentation and practice, you'll develop some skills and be able to write some really impressive games. Like some of the games I've seen on BASIC are like Donkey Kong clones or simple platformers and stuff. Really impressive stuff within the bounds of the hardware of the time. And now we have ever increasing power and better hardware which runs BASIC. So I'm excited for the Commodore X16 to come out, because it's going to be the most powerful computer I've ever had which runs BASIC. And I had a great deal of fun with it. I mean, when I was a kid, I was like revered. I was a naughty kid. I wasn't popular. I wasn't known for much that was good. But I was known for being good at computers and being able to write programs. And it was like something of a mini celebrity status for me, being as that I didn't really have that many friends. So now that I'm an adult, it's not quite as much of an ego trip now to do it. But it's still a useful thing to do, and I would encourage anyone, really, not just young people, anyone who's interested in computers, to pick up BASIC and have a go on it. And here's a demonstration of just some modes. That was the 80 column mode. And that's useful if you're using text characters to have games. Then you're probably going to want to go for the bigger ones for better performance and just less complexity, I suppose. So yeah, but there's different things you can do. You can move text around the screen, change the colour of it. You can draw lines, circles, squares. You can fill areas. You can do Boolean mathematics operations. We'll get into that later. And things like that. So it all sounds very difficult and complicated because the words are difficult and complicated. But realistically, once you've had a bit of practice, it's like riding a bike. The mechanics of it are very difficult, but in practice, it's not too difficult. It's easy for an intelligent human being such as yourself. And for me, most programs are going to start that way. So the first line is going to be line 10, and the first command is going to be clear the screen. Now the reason we say 10 and not 1 is because you might want to add lines in the middle later on. So if you do 1, 2, 3 and 4, there isn't any gaps in the middle. If you do 10, 20, 30, 40, you've got 9 spare slots that you can insert code into. And that's pretty much the only organisational skill you're going to need. So it's very simple, and we'll have a look at that. Automatic line numbering, for instance, is one really good tool that makes it even easier because you don't even have to remember to number your stuff. So you just type auto, and then it'll type 10 for you, and 20 for you, and 30 for you, and you can keep listing lines of code until you fancy the end, and then you press escape on the keyboard, and then you can type list in order to relist your program to have a look at what you've written, and then eventually type run in order to test it. Now, further down the road, when you're more fancy skills, you'll want on error statements, which mean if something goes wrong, do this or go to this location. But for now, it's going to be clear the screen and then probably write something to the screen, either print a statement or do some graphics. So we'll have a look at doing some of that. As you can see here, I'm using the print statement in order to print a sentence to the screen. Because I've put it inside those quote marks, it'll just record everything in there, numbers, letters, whatever I type. It's not going to try and understand it in any other way apart from it's just a sentence that I have written. It doesn't have a command meaning. So I'm making a simple program here just to repeat the sentence "Welcome to Hell" over and over. And I've put some spaces in just to make it look a little bit more interesting. So as you can see, it's automatically numbering the lines for me, and I'm putting in spaces in front of print and then the inside of the quote marks bit. So trying to make it look a bit more organised, and then when I run the program, as you can see, it prints exactly what I asked it to. No mistake, no syntactic errors or anything like that. So, and then I type list, I can see what I've written. And if I now want to go in and optimise my code, I can probably figure out a way to do the exact same thing I've just done, or something similar, without using so many lines of code. For instance, I can use a logical statement. Instead of saying print, 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 print each time, I can just specify print this and do it in this logical way. You know, do it on the next line and the next line and the next line, or put a space and then the next line and then a space and then the next line, like I've done here. And then it will just carry on doing it until I press escape. And this kind of thing is really, really, really useful inside games because a lot of it is actually repetitive movements. Even AI, a lot of AI you'd think was complicated. It's just repetitive movements and reacting to the environment, which is why it's so easy to learn the tactics of enemies inside games because they're effectively, you can trick them into acting a certain way. And then there is, you don't even have to end the line. You can carry on printing out the thing and just put a space instead of a line break. So that's quite fun. And then if I put all of those things together, and I practice them for a couple of hours, I will have a mastery of CLS, print, go to, if, then, else, and all the rest of it. And that is literally the basic building block, the initial building block that you're going to need. So that is how simple it is. And the fact that I was able to do this as a 6-7-year-old child, it just says to you, if you've got time and you apply yourself, you can learn it. And then you can take what you've learned here into other programming languages, because even though the commands will change and the organizational methods will improve, the actual underlying logic behind your concept of your program, that isn't going to change. That's going to develop and get better, but it's not going to necessarily change. So, as you can see here, I'm using all the things that I've learned to generate a new program that's going to do the same thing with far less words. And it's going to end naturally rather than just looping. So it's a bit more polished. And it's intuitive as well. You can see from here, as I'm playing with it, I've learned that a comma at the end, or a semicolon at the end, and then presumably a colon at the end will produce different effects when I run my program. So one of them just starts a new line, one of them starts the new line with a space, and one of them is on the same line and just puts a space between the two words. I think that's the syntax part. Yeah, that's the syntax, putting things in the right place and defining the end of sentences, if you like, or the parts of sentences with the right comma or question mark or the right punctuation mark. And once you've got a good grip on how to format text and how to use text like that with print statements, pretty soon you'll be moving on to graphics, and then after that how to user control graphics on the screen in order to make your simple games. And that's where it really gets interesting, because as soon as you've got a concept of how to do that, you will start writing games. They'll be a bit crappy at first, or they won't have menus, or they'll be simple, because you've just started, but they'll be games and you'll have fun writing them. And after you've written 3 or 4 simple games, you can start combining those into one game. That's when it starts to really get interesting. So learning the commands, the logic operators, the operations themselves, and learning how to set variables and put things in different spaces in your memory for recollection later. These will be key skills to your game creation career. As you can see, I have a penchant for using for, if, and then to create these loops within the program, so you can reset colors, or you can do repeated things and then put it inside a for and then statement, so that you don't have to do each bit. You just give it the general framework and it will go off and do the thing. So I've used the random operator here as well, R&D, and that just tells it to pull up a random number. Oh, I made a mistake, I'll have to correct that. Oh, I see what I've done. I've used the wrong mode. Well, that's not quite what I wanted, but you can tell it's trying. I've just done a bug in the code somewhere. But this is another reason why it's so easy. Debugging your code line by line is far simpler than debugging a whole program that's going wrong somewhere, and you have to find where it's going wrong, and then fix that bit without interrupting any other parts. This is far, far easier. Which is why I think a lot of people who start this way generally find their whole careers easier, because you just think that it's easier. Rather than putting up the building block in your head and going, "Oh, programming's so difficult." It's like, no, it's not. It's no more difficult than learning mathematics. If you can understand how a calculator works and use a calculator, then you can understand this. This is like a combination between a calculator and a translating program, like Google Talk, Google Translate. So anyway, back to the program. I'm putting some graphics in, some random plotting. gcall is graphic color. Plot is find a space on the screen and do this thing randomly between these points on the screen, and then next is to repeat the loop. I've buggered it up again. Oh, it's a typo. Let's just fix that quickly. And here we go. Here's 2 minutes of code resulting in a little program. It's not even a game. It just does stars of different colours. And then when the program ends, it will still cycle the colours. It's good, isn't it? Let's see what it does in another mode. Oh, you don't get any colours in this mode. You only get black and white. So there you go. That's the introduction of the basics of BASIC. I've given you some footage to look at, some things to think about. So yeah, it's time to go off and maybe get yourself set up. I can help you with that if you get in contact with me. And the reason I'm doing this is my goal is, by the end of my first year of doing this, is to develop a game. And for that game it's like a platform game, I suppose, that I want. It doesn't have to be a side scroller. It could be any type of platformer. And then after that I want a level editor so that I can share it with other people and we can share the levels. Yeah, it's a bit like Mario Maker, I suppose, like a cut down, customized Mario Maker that's not Mario. Sorry Nintendo, I'm stealing your idea, unashamedly. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.